In the year 2000, Russia started to release its political prisoners. In the midst of them was a man called Andres Tamas, who had been incarcerated for 55 years. He was a Hungarian. He was talking gibberish. And finally, somebody said, execute him. He is of no use to anyone. But somebody said, at least bring in a psychiatrist to examine him before you choose to execute him. So they went and brought a Hungarian psychiatrist. He stayed with Tamas for a few days, and he came out and said, you know what? He's not insane. He's not talking gibberish. He's talking an old Hungarian dialect. You have nearly driven him insane. You brought him in here when he was 20. He has now lived in near solitary confinement for over 50 years. Give him back to us. We will make him well. Andres Tamas was put into a wheelchair and being taken out. What do you think was the first request he made? If you have not heard the story, the first request he made was for a mirror. He had not seen a mirror since the age of 20. He looked into the mirror for a fraction of a moment and then turned it away, buried his face in his hands, and sobbed uncontrollably. What do you think it would be like for over half a century not to look at your own reflection in some way? You start off in the robust virility of youth, and now you're a wizened old man looking at all that time has extracted and exacted from you. You know, we take for granted a mirror. We get up every morning, do our necessary ablutions, put on innocent forms of disfigurement, and we walk out of there to look like what we wished we did. And yet, when you come back from a long journey, you realize you actually resemble your passport picture much more than you resemble anything else. It's true. Is there a mirror for the soul? Is there a reflection that you can glean, that you can gain of what God intended for you and me to look like, to stand before the powers of our time? And how best is a life like that framed? I want to take you tonight to look at one man like that. His name was Daniel, and he knew where to draw the lines. And to those of you about to graduate, on the eve of that graduation, you're drawing one line today. You're crossing over all the discipline of study that you've poured in, and all of the long hours are bringing you this reward of walking away from here with learning, understanding, experience, encountering mentors, and a certificate to remind you what you accomplished during this time. I wanted to talk to you a little bit tonight about the 3 lines that will be important for you to draw as you proceed from here. And you will learn from Daniel how he marched to a different drummer, the lines that he drew that helped him become a world changer. The first is this: he drew the line of resistance by training his appetite. He trained his hungers. There was nothing wrong with eating at the king's table. He could have had a banquet night after night, day after day, and enjoyed it. After all, he could have seen it as God's provision for him. A few weeks ago, I had a marvelous opportunity of speaking at the State Prayer Breakfast in Honolulu in Hawaii. You know, those are very hard invitations to turn down. It's interesting, shortly before that, the week before, I was speaking in Iowa. And every time people ask me, where were you going? I said, well, I was heading to Iowa to speak at the prayer breakfast. And they said, we'll be praying for you. Following week, they said, where are you going? I said, to the Hawaiian prayer breakfast. They said, have fun. That's the kind of image people have. Go there and have fun. But you know, in the itinerant life, there are these allurements, there are the seductions. Why would one want to go to Saskatoon in February when you can end up going instead to Honolulu and enjoy the scenery then? If you have a resistance to winter, you'd rather be in the Hawaiian temperatures rather than having to get attired 3 or 4 layers of clothes. we move towards the direction of our comfort. We do. But the important thing is how God reminds us never to get so comfortable with comforts that it is the comfort principle that ends up driving all that you do. Here is a man who trained his appetite, training his longings, training his hungers. And the marvelous thing is this, how he reminded himself again and again that he did not want to get spoiled by all that the king would afford to him and give to him. Instead, he disciplined himself and backed away from even that which could have been all right for him to enjoy, but he resisted it for a greater and a higher call.